The BMW X3 is always offered something of a Goldilocks type setup. It's not as large and as cumbersome as something like an X5, but it offers more space and practicality than an X1 or an X2. And needless to say, over the years, it's proven very popular. This is the brand new 4th generation BMW X3, and it aims to deliver more tech than before, but still offering that kind of blend of all the things that you want from a usual family SUV. Now, we've come out to Germany to test out what it's like, and we're going to be seeing what it's like to drive and what it's like to live with on a daily basis, and whether you should be considering it if you are in the market for a rather upmarket SUV. So let's get behind the wheel and let's take a look around this car and see what this new X3 is like.
The new X3 displays a strikingly different design to the car which came before it. Now, of course, BMW in recent times has been one for, well, shall we say, controversial vehicle styling. And while there are some elements of this new X3 which are going to get people talking, it does feel like a slightly more toned down example of where the kind of styling design for BMW is heading. Of course, we've got the massive front kidney grills and the ultra sharp headlights, and around the back the whole car looks quite a lot more rounded than it did on the previous generation X3. Is it a good looking car? Well, I think in the metal it's got plenty of impact, and certainly against other cars in the range, this X3 doesn't feel like a baby or a smaller model. It's still a fully fledged SUV, and with this new look, I think it has even more presence and impact on the road than the car which came before it.
The interior of the X3 gets loads of those features that you'd expect from a modern day BMW. It's a very tech heavy affair in here. We've got a big widescreen display, but it's got all of those key functions that you need, as well as Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. In terms of practicality, it's quite spacious. There's a deep recessed section down here, and there's a good area underneath the armrest for those loose items. You can keep them out of sight. What's the material quality like? Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag actually. Up top, things are pretty good, but lower down there's some really scratchy plastics, and I'm really not a fan of this black plastic underneath the main screen. It feels thin and flimsy and just not what you'd expect, but it is contrasted by these cool see-through elements which light up depending on what you're doing. So if you change the driving mode, for instance, or if you adjust the temperature, it'll glow blue or red, whether you're getting hotter or colder. Overall, it's practical and well finished. I just think it's let down in a couple of key areas by those poorer materials. So what's the space like in the back of the X3? Well, being a reasonably large SUV, it's, as you might imagine, pretty good. There's plenty of space for my knees, and there's a great amount of room for my feet actually, and despite having a panoramic sunroof in this car, there's loads of headroom, so it's going to be comfortable for everyone involved. There's a hump in the middle, but it's not too large, so actually someone sitting in the middle isn't going to be feeling too squashed. And you have got some decent accessories to use. There's twin USB-C charging points, and I like the physical controls for the heating and ventilation, which are a nice little change compared to usual full digital setups, so you do get a smaller screen for the temperature. You've got some seat back pockets and netting over here, and this material, though quite unpleasant to touch, is actually robust. And particularly if you've got kids back here and they're going to be sitting in their seats with their feet pointing out, then at least that's going to be easier to clean, and it's not going to look too battered after too many trips. It delivers just what you'd expect from a reasonably large SUV, spacious, well made, and it is comfortable. So what is this BMW X3 like to drive? Well, to be clear, we are in the range-topping M50 version, and that means it's got a 3-litre straight-six turbocharged engine, and it's producing, well, near enough 400 brake horsepower, so it's an immensely powerful setup. 0-60 will be coming in around 4.5 seconds, and in a car this size, that feels quite quick indeed. We've got a automatic gearbox controlling all of it, and it's going through all 4 wheels, though there's some clever diff trickery going on, so it can feel more sporty and more rear driven than that all-wheel drive setup might lead you to believe. However, you just drive it normally, it feels very refined. It's very quiet, it's comfortable, the ride is good, you can slacken it off, and when you do so, this car deals with everyday situations like an everyday SUV. That means when you're driving it around town, like I am currently, the X3 is very easy to live with. The steering isn't too heavy, and you're actually quite well suited in terms of visibility. It feels like an easy car to position, and it feels nice and square on the road, which is quite helpful. In fact, it's this car's level of composure which makes it actually really quite impressive. It remains flat and level through the bends, but it doesn't feel too jarring. You can, of course, sharpen up the dampers, and It makes the car a little bit too stiff for everyday driving, in my opinion anyway. But keep it in comfort, and it's a very relaxing and quiet car. Even on the motorway, it remains quite hushed. Now, of course, you can adjust your settings. You can pop it into sport mode right here, and that tightens everything up and gives you, well, as you can hear, quite a lot more noise. So it does have that true M feeling behind it if you want it. But what is really nice is that you don't have to drive it like that the whole time if you don't want to. So even though you've got everything turned up to maximum and you've got everything switching into red and it's all very exciting, if you don't feel like that, the good thing is that you can switch this X3 M50 out and into a more comfortable setting. There are more efficiency based ones, but it just feels like you're just muting the car a little bit. Now, you will be able to get the X3 with more sensible engines, delivering better efficiency. This X3 M50 at best will be able to deliver about 40, but during our time with the car, we've been anything from the mid to late 20s. So if you are on a more everyday search for a more everyday car, then I'd be leaning towards the more everyday engines of the X3. You're not losing any of that poise or positioning or the body holding, but it's just going to be cheaper to run overall. What I do like is this new generation of paddles that you get on these M cars. They're really very pleasant to use, actually. And because they're nice and broad, you never feel like you're fishing about for them, as you sometimes get on some Volkswagen Group products where the shifters are just a little bit too stubby. It doesn't feel all that intuitive to use. And again, it's just nicer having big, solid paddle shifters that are very easily accessible when you're moving a little bit more quickly. Again, because the X3 sits in the mid-size of the segment, it's not too large to deal with. Of course, if you feel like you don't want something this cumbersome, then the X1 and the X2 are still fine choices. But this isn't a tricky car to park. It doesn't feel too overly large out on the road either. Of course, the acceleration in this M50 is, well, it doesn't really give up. It keeps pulling. It's one of the most powerful straight six engines that BMW has put into a performance car, into one of its production cars, in fact. And because of that, it never feels like it's running out of steam. It's a very exciting car to drive more quickly, but it remains composed and it remains just as practical as the everyday X3 when you want it to be too. It feels like the new X3 has taken a step in the right direction. It feels more upmarket inside, if a little bit let down by some materials, and it's still just as good to drive, but most importantly, it is more practical, which is what you want from a family-focused SUV. Now, of course, you don't need to go for this range-topping M50 version if you don't want raised running costs. There are some more regular X3 models to choose from, and I think that those will be the pick of the bunch. Inside, it feels really pleasant, and it's spacious in the back as well, so if you are bringing the kids along for the ride, the X3 is going to prove very useful indeed. It's why if you are in the market for an upmarket premium SUV, I think the X3 is well worth checking out. Now, thank you for watching this Motors new car review of the BMW X3. Please leave us a like below if you have enjoyed this video, and let us know in the comment section what you think of this new X3 and what you think of the look of it as well. I think it's quite different. And since you're here, please remember to subscribe to the Motors YouTube channel, and if you hit that bell icon, you'll get a notification each time we upload a new video.